Okay, I'm gonna say it, the F1 brand has peaked. No, I'm not talking about the sport aspect of Formula One. The action on track, the competition, all that sort of stuff, drivers and teams, is actually in a very, very healthy place. What I am talking about though is F1, the brand, the product, that thing that is packaged up and sold to everybody around the world. And that all involves things like the movie deals, the Netflix deals, the endless streams of extra merchandise, collaborations with the likes of Disney, Doritos, McDonald's, Hot Wheels, Lego, the list goes on and on and on. The whole focus on celebrity involvement and how if these famous people are watching F1 it somehow makes it more relevant. And weirdly enough, Grand Prix which are normally sold out aren't anymore. The British Grand Prix, for example, you normally wouldn't get near, but here in 2025 tickets are still available. And this aggressive push of F1 into the forefront of lifestyle and culture just feels like it's reaching critical mass. And we're also at this unique time where everything seems to be happening all at once. Formula One is printing money right now. Everybody wants a taste, but the problem is, what now? Where does F1 go from here? Is there even any more room above or even any more momentum to take the sport even further upwards? Now, of course, you may or may not agree that the F1 brand has peaked or is just about to. So, on that note, let's talk about it. Now, the very real thing here is that the worlds of marketing and advertising love the idea that trends can go upwards forever and ever. But unfortunately for them, hype always has a shelf life. With these sorts of things, no plans are ever made for long-term sustainability, and when the bottom actually does fall out of the market, everyone is left standing around going, what the hell happened? I sense if it does happen, F1 and Liberty are going to be left standing around going, hey, we had Doritos and McDonald's. Why does nobody like us anymore? To which, of course, the blame will probably be pointed towards us, the core F1 fans. Now, whether you like it or not, Formula One is packaged and sold as an entertainment product and cultural phenomenon. And all of these things, whether it's Formula One or skateboarding or Gangnam Style, all follow a cycle of boom and then bust. And the question isn't if a decline happens, it's always how and when. And this is why I just sense that F1 faces a massive risk of overextending itself, if it hasn't done already, where the novelty and dopamine hit it gives casual fans just wears off and then they move on to the next thing, the next trend. And from what I can see, and you might be able to see this too, is that the saturation and peaking is kind of starting already to happen, or it feels so anyway. We have of course just had the much anticipated launch of the new Brad Pitt led F1 movie, which also has some so-so mixed responses. Now the cinematography is out of this world, but the plot and emotional connection it gives you leaves a lot to be desired. Which in hindsight is hardly surprising because given that this movie was hyped up to unbelievable proportions and tried to please everybody, which now risks not pleasing anybody. It could be as if the vast majority of people look upon this movie as Drive to Survive the movie, and then Grand Prix weekends as Drive to Survive Live, as their first real taste of Formula One was this show on Netflix rather than this living, breathing sport with this rich heritage and history. Now you can imagine the original idea for this movie was for it to be used as a springboard which would then bounce Formula One up to this new plateau where it can conquer and just be god of everything. Where of course it might knock some of the other greatest sporting events off their perch. And whilst the growth of F1 in the last 5 years has been unprecedented, check out the F1 ticketing website and see just how many tickets there are at future Grand Prix still available. Like I said earlier, the British Grand Prix normally a sellout, but you can still get a ticket if you want it. There are also other reports of viewership and ticket sales appearing to be on the decline, all for various reasons, but also declining nonetheless. Which is also quite odd because considering what we've seen in Formula One so far in 2025, it's been one of the best and most competitive in recent years and also the most entertaining. Multiple winners of course, and also plenty of drama and action on track. And this also makes F1's initial growth even more impressive because when this boom was first felt around 2019, just before COVID started, when the whole Drive to Survive series was being launched, the action on track at this time was, as you might remember, very, very predictable. More or less the same results week in, week out, a single driver or team dominating, exactly the kind of thing, in fact, that almost killed Formula One in the 2000s, or early 2000s. So potentially that this growth could be attributed singularly to Drive to Survive. People watched this series at home and then they wanted to go and attend races to go and see what all the fuss was about. Now, a major sign that F1 has hit its peak is that the grid walks, TikToks and influencer marketing, product collaborations, all seem to be now incredibly forced and also gimmicky as well. However, though, some of F1's new partnerships that have been announced recently do make you wonder, is this now the beginning of the end? You know, F1 brought to you by Doritos. Formula One brought to you by McDonald's. Formula One brought to you by Disney. Haha. It just cheapens a sport which shouldn't have to bow to anybody. I suppose the final straw for me personally was when it was announced that Disney was becoming a commercial partner. That was when you really felt that the sport, or the brand I should say, has now jumped the shark. Now Hot Wheels and Lego makes sense because it can encourage kids and spark their imaginations. But the others just feel like a cheapening of the sport. And I don't know about you, but to me this new over-commercialized Formula One just doesn't sit well for some reason. And it also feels like it's built on foundations which aren't really that stable either. Which then does leave you wondering, are we now at a point where F1 is perhaps too visible? And also no longer has that exclusive and authentic feel that Bernie Ecclestone used to grow and sustain the sport throughout his tenure there. By Formula One chasing and accepting every commercial opportunity, effectively over-commercialization, it does risk diluting its core identity. Which also, from what you read, has hurt other products such as the Premier League or the NFL or UFC, which leaves many long-standing traditional fans more and more disconnected. Now at this stage I think it's probably quite important that we draw a line between the sport and the product. The health and integrity of the actual racing, competitive cars and drivers, the teams, the whole thing is actually looking very, very good. In fact, much better than in recent years. There are, of course, no pay drivers this season, and every single team can score a point on their day. So actually, it's quite a good time from that respect to be a Formula One fan. But then, of course, the sport is in good shape now. We'll have to wait and see what the new regulations bring in 2026, and that whole barrel of fun we'll have to look forward to. But then with that, what happens if casual interest drops? What if these millions of new fans decide that it's not their sort of thing anymore and turn their back on the sport? When the casual wave inevitably cools, like it does with every trend-driven pop culture moment, F1 faces a serious challenge. How many of these new fans are going to stick around when the Netflix narratives and Hollywood grid walks and viral TikTok moments fade from the spotlight? It could be said that many of these new fans are here for the entertainment value first, not necessarily for the sport itself. If the spectacle slows down or if a dominant team makes the sport feel predictable again, casual interest will taper off. Now this rise over the last few years has left F1 with a far more broader audience pool, but also one which is probably a bit more transient too. The danger is of course that you can grow fast by being trendy, but trends quickly fade off too. And so a massive challenge which might face F1 is how it will pivot and react if mainstream interest moves on in the coming years. And if that happens, I really hope Formula One does take it on the chin and doesn't go down the whole desperation vibe. It really, really does not need to do that. And so overall, with the Formula One that we find right here and now, you do wonder how sustainable this level of hype and expansion really is. Particularly, of course, in the United States, where there are currently 3 Grand Prix, and I wouldn't rule out there being a 4th one later down the line in perhaps New York, for example. And as we know, people vote with their feet and their wallets, and if attendances drop at races like Vegas and Miami and nothing can be done to fix it, I wouldn't be surprised if they dropped off the calendar altogether. Which then leads me on to think, when Cadillac joined the grid in 2026, after a couple of years, could they be left wondering, hey, where's all this attention and earnings and hype you promised us? Could they just be too late to the party? But this is, of course, if my feeling is actually right, which it may not be. Do let me know in the comments below. And so with F1 potentially at the peak of the mountain, staring at a long way down, I think it needs to remember a few things so as to not let all this hard work and money go to waste, so that it can kind of consolidate its position. And so firstly, long-term growth comes from balance and also honouring the core fans and traditions of the sport. Secondly, prioritising and maintaining on-track competition. And then thirdly, and this is probably the most critical one and something that we've seen F1 do in the most recent years, is that if F1 leans too much on fast money and fast expansion, it risks alienating both hardcore fans and also the newer followers once the shine and the novelty of the sport wears off. The hardcore fans walk away because they don't recognise the sport anymore, and the newer casual fans walk away because they're just finished with it. They're on to the next thing. And so with that, it is my opinion that F1, the brand, the product, has peaked. And if these things aren't addressed, it could learn some seriously harsh lessons on the way down. Yes, I know it's kind of a depressing take this time, but I thought it had to be said. But let me know what you guys think in the comments below. So anyway, guys, thanks for watching. Do like the video if you enjoyed. And if you haven't already, do subscribe, join the channel, all that sort of stuff. So anyway, thank you for watching. I'm Paul, and I'll see you later. Cheers.